school system. We have most schools have school social workers. Not all, but most schools do. But the case in Chapter 8 is about a man named Frank Haynes. He's a social worker. He has an MSW degree, master's degree, and he speaks Spanish. Then we have two girls, Lisa Santiago and Loretta Santiago. Lisa is 8th grader. Loretta is a 7th grader. They both transferred from Texas. They used to live in Texas with their mother and their father. Their mother and father got divorced. The father won custody of these kids in Texas, and they had to go with their father. Their father is Mr. Santiago. He is from Mexico. He was married to Lisa and Loretta's mother. Then he got divorced and he remarried, and he now has 5 younger children besides Lisa and Loretta. And then there is Latino counselor, or now we call it Latinx, Latinx, Latinx counselor, Ramon Garcia. So they're all involved in this case. The case is mostly about Lisa and Loretta. In the school where Lisa and Loretta go now, there is something called an ESL program. Who knows what ESL means? What do the letters mean? ESL.
Maybe something about sign language. Maybe.
No.
Isn't it English being the second language?
Excellent. ESL, English as a second language. So these kids still do speak fluent Spanish. They came to school and they were enrolled in ESL because English is their second language, not their first language. Frank, the social worker, got this case about Lisa and Loretta because they have been absent for 2 weeks. And he noticed a huge change in the girls since the summer. So they were in the ESL program. They were doing okay. They were learning English and all the other courses. And then over the summer, they went home to be with their mother in Texas. And when they came back, they were very different kids, and they were also absent from school. So Frank, who spoke Spanish, went to visit the family. And when he got to the home, Lisa and Loretta's stepmother served them coffee and then left the room because Frank could only speak to Lisa and Loretta's father. Frank was not allowed, even though he spoke Spanish, he was not allowed to talk to the mother, the stepmother. Only the father makes these decisions. He found out that the reason why the girls were absent for 2 weeks is because their father said they couldn't go to school. The father said they couldn't go to school because Lisa went out on a date. Lisa's an 8th grader. Lisa went out on a date, and the chaperone she took was Loretta, who was in 7th grade. The father was very, very upset because that's not how in his culture it works at all. He grounded them for 2 weeks and he locked them in their room. The girls escaped and went to visit their aunt's house, but the father knew where they were, and the kids were afraid to come back home because he was going to beat them. Different cultures. In Mr. Santiago's culture, Mexican culture, you don't go out on a date unless you have a chaperone, and the chaperone cannot be your younger sister. It has to be an adult. But they were very upset that this even happened. And what happened over the summer that changed is that when they went to visit their parents, when they went to visit their mother, the father was also went back to Texas to visit his family, and the father started verbally abusing their mother and saying what a terrible woman she is. She was living with another man and he wasn't married. And they weren't married. So they saw their father verbally abusing their mother and they got very upset. They did not want to go back with their father. They wanted to stay in Texas with their mother. But they had to come back. The father insisted that they come back. They again violated curfew. They again did things. They started swearing at their father, swearing at their stepmother. They were now grounded by their father for an entire month. They couldn't go on any school trips. They were saying terrible things to their father. Their father locked them in the room again. So this idea is that Frank understood the culture. And Frank eventually got to talk to the father and explain to the father that these two girls were not any longer part of the kids who came from Mexico. They were trying very hard to be American. And Frank said if they don't pay attention to, if Frank said to the father, you have to understand that there's more involved with these older girls than just listening to you. So eventually, the end of the story is that the social worker, Frank, got the father and the two girls to a counselor who was also from Mexico, Ramon Garcia, a Latinx counselor. So Frank tried to get family counseling into the family to help Frank and Frank's wife understand what it's like to raise American kids. So the moral of this whole story is that the social worker can try to help and explain, but he needs to also understand the culture. Okay, so there's Frank, Lisa, and Loretta, and Mr. Santiago, and then Ramon Garcia, the counselor. So that's just giving you a little idea of what a social worker does. Social worker, according to what we were writing down, social work has a lot of roles in the school system. First and foremost, the social worker works with the individuals. They work with some of the areas that they work in is, for instance, truancy, pregnancy, undesirable behavior, substance abuse, suicide, anything that they find from the teacher or the principal that the student is having difficulty in school because of psychological, emotional problems. That's who they deal with. They are often referred to by teachers or the psychologist. They don't cost, when you see a social worker in the school system, it does not cost any money. It's part of the school system. So they work with the individual. They also work with the family. Stephanie, any idea why a social worker would work with the family, not just the individual child?
I'm really not sure. I would say so that the family, after they speak to the child, they will speak to the family to see if they're all on the same page or if they can go further from where they're at.
Good. Very good. I've said to you from the beginning, and one day it'll make much more sense. It's really, really hard to work with the child without the family. The child could say and do all sorts of things, but they have to go home to their family, whoever the family is. And usually, the family can notice that there is issues or problems, or sometimes the family is the problem. Sometimes the social worker works with the family around parenting, around special ed, around the child's development, around suspected emotional issues. It's not unusual for the social worker to go into the family and find that there's one of the parents are also have a lot of emotional problems or substance abuse problems, or they're living and they're homeless and they're living in their car, or they're living on the streets. So they do social workers do a lot of family work. They also do group work. When I was working in a school system, the group work was the most fun I've ever had. So you're working with freshmen or sophomores in high school. You have a group, usually around lunchtime, sometimes before school, sometimes after school, about issues. Sometimes I had a group of children whose parents are divorced. Sometimes I'd have a group with children who live in single parent homes. Sometimes I'd work with kids in high school who are parents themselves. And we'd have a group, and the group would pretty much be run by the kids in the group. Sometimes I'd have a group of kids who want to go to college. There's all sorts of issues that you do. Sexual orientation is a big issue right now. Coping with parents who are using drugs group. So you see, the idea of the group is to get the kids together who have similar issues and similar problems. They can hear each other rather than me tell them what to do. So that's working with groups. There's organizations and communities that social workers also work with. The social workers work in the communities, helping to find resources, as several of you have mentioned, after school programs. Right now, the social workers in the community, Chantel, because of COVID and because so many kids are Zooming and not in school, what do you think the social worker might work with in the community? What are some problems that the community has as the kids are all on Zoom?
This question's for me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Keeping kids' attentions. Like, I think right now, it's really hard to navigate this online schooling, and it was already difficult, like in classrooms, but now that we're only doing it virtually and we're not able to be in the classroom with a professor or a teacher, it's really hard to continue to go to classes and pay attention and do the work. I think that's probably the biggest struggle.
Yeah, at any age, I agree, at the university level and the kindergarten level, all of them. Paige, is there another reason you think why social workers are working in the community because the kids are on Zoom?
I'm not really sure. I think what Chantel said was, I agree with that, but I don't really know.
I bet you as soon as I say it, you'll all know what I'm talking about. Jaleesa, do you have any idea what I'm talking about besides the areas already? What's another area that they're missing?
I'm not sure. I would say like maybe